Thank you, Amber. Hey, guys. First off, can you hear me? I don't think I'm going to use this table. I'm going to walk a little bit. So in the back, okay, good. So first off, before we get started, I want to thank the Small Business Development Committee that has put this series together. So this has been a 4-part series for those of you who don't know. So there's been a build up into this kind of looking at examples of different companies, more tangible. But with this group has come together and put together a lot of hard work, time, effort, and energy. So those who have been on the Small Business Development Committee, if you would please stand so we can recognize you. Please give them a round of applause. All right. And I'm going to grab these lights, or if you would grab those lights so we can see the screen here. You guys got a good visual on that? Yes. Awesome. So I know this looks a little bit dreary, but there is hope involved with this story. And to segue into what I'm going to get into, I do want to cover briefly the Small Business Development Committee's vision and what we've been working towards. So with the current state, in essence, we've got very, very big challenges that businesses are dealing with. And so in essence, I think you could say that there is a degree of a flood, people with their heads underwater struggling. I think we saw that through COVID with many of our small businesses, and many are still continuously working to figure out solutions and ways to overcome the challenges that they face. And so the Chamber is doing a great job in that. So being a part of Jennifer and her vision and continuously working to bring tremendous value through the Chamber at all different levels, not just the small business development level, has been a very rewarding experience for me. But this particular group, focusing particularly on small businesses, we're looking at creating adaptive, creative, innovative businesses that thrive under whatever challenges arise. And so the way that I would say that is an anti-fragile business. So in essence, it rises with the tides. It can move with the challenge. And that's a very technical way of saying it. But being that it is a vision statement, we chose to be very intentional with what we say that we're moving towards. And so we're being very intentional with how we get towards that by basically reverse engineering strategic, tactical, and operational, but to then overlay kind of an idea to give you a sense of the details that have equated to this kind of high-level piece is looking at those issues that businesses face. So what we have here is a Pareto distribution from ADP's research of the top issues that businesses face. And we'll get into some more of that here in a minute. And then the Chamber has been working to receive the feedback from the small business development, from the small businesses to understand what are those needs so that we can basically become that well-rounded business, or that we can support well-rounded businesses. And so what that would be is kind of like a current state. And so let's see if this pointer works. Oh, great. So right here, for an example, this would be relationship with staff. So let's imagine that there is a current business that has taken an evaluation on all of these different measures of what would conclude as a well-rounded business. What we're trying to do is basically show examples and bring forth examples and provide value to help them strengthen those gaps. So current state red, target state blue. So can you see how it is being more well-rounded is that vision? And so this would be at an individual basis as well as a collective basis. And so here is kind of that vision. So from a strategic element, reverse engineering vision to task, because the gap is basically here. This is where we are today. This is where we want to be in the future. And then the constant feedback and value add is the mission in between. And so we've also leveraged a modified version of the scientific method, specific for complex problem solving. I know you're familiar with this methodology, where there's basically 8 steps in this framework. On the strategic side, the first 4 of the 8 are planning. Notice the P here. From the tactical perspective, those who we've acknowledged, pulling together really the best in the area, as well as individuals and larger bodies, organizations, to form the committee so that we can execute the things that we've got defined here. So in essence, this is a high-level visual of what we've been working through with the Small Business Development Committee. And our first cycle through the 8 steps was geared around the Great Resignation. So PDCA cycle 1, so right, Plan, Do, Check, Act, 1 cycle around what was identified on the Pareto distribution, which is workforce ultimately. But I won't walk you through all of that. Really, we're going to be focusing on the recap of what is the gap, looking at that in a little bit of depth, spending more time on the root cause of what we believe is the root cause based on a certain degree of data. And hopefully what you're here to receive is the best practices, some things that maybe you can take away from our company at Roll a Monkey and other great companies that I'll be speaking about as well. And so looking at that gap a little bit closer here, 39% of small businesses said that finding qualified employees was their biggest issue in 2022. So look at the contrast between, say, that and number 3. That's near double fold, right? So it by far is the largest gap that small businesses are facing. So that there's something monumental here that we're taking a look at today. So the what, right? So what is that? Workforce, that's people. And this gives a pretty good picture as to what occurred in 2021, a mass exodus of the workforce. So where is that happening? Right here. Georgia is at the top of the board. When? There was a lot of speculation that it would just be 2021 and then things would kind of normalize and revert back. 2022, it's still holding at record-breaking numbers. Who? Pretty much everyone in this room is affected by the group. So I would say half of the individuals in this room directly affected here, involving quitting, but the majority of us here are business leaders who have this workforce at this age group that are leaving our bodies, our institutions. So now jumping ahead here, getting into the root cause, looking at some of the feedback from Gloria's breakdown, who covered the first session. If you guys weren't aware of that first session, there was a lot of in-depth dives into the root cause, but for me, I'm just going to extract this piece out here, or a couple of pieces out here, that I think really paint a good picture. We're going to look at the commonality between women, men. I want you to pay attention. Lack of respect for supervisor, no appreciation, no appreciation. Also, young and old. So basically the whole spectrum. So those demographics are dealing with the same root cause issue. And I think that Ken does a very good job in articulating what is occurring here at the root of it. Perception of leadership care is poor. We aren't meeting our employees' needs. And he's the author of The Great Resignation, Why Employers Have Lost Power and How to Build a Dream Career. So our group spent a lot of time looking at a lot of different experts who have studied very deeply into what is at the root of the mass exodus that you guys saw, that blip in 2021 that is remaining and holding true in 2022. And so this is one component of it. Now, all of these are components that feed into the root of this. This is not one smoking gun, but this is what I'm going to be focusing on during this presentation. And beyond what Ken is saying, another critical point that I want to bring to light here is there is a generational shift, and this younger generation is seeking to work with businesses that have a purpose beyond profit. She is the author of The Great Resignation, the underlying reason of people quitting in droves. So both of these individuals have spent quite some time investigating this phenomenon. So if you would, take a look into some of their work, and I think they'll do a much better job than myself in kind of speaking to some of these points if you're interested in more of the root of what we're discussing here. Who here is familiar with Maslow's hierarchy? Okay, pretty much everybody. Who here is familiar with the concept of ikigai? Okay. So this concept of ikigai is a framework that I used when I transitioned from the, let's say, workforce, because to some degree I am an early statistic of the Great Resignation. I left what most would consider to be a very great job, and I do agree that it is a great job. But in essence, what I was missing was at this top tier, which is meaning, purpose, this mission component. I was in the 99th percentile for my age at 25 for pay. I would say I did a pretty good job at my work. I've got someone who could maybe...
Yes, you did.
Okay, so we've got somebody who can say that I did an okay job there. Right. So when it came to love, from a scale, my background is engineering, so I'm going to convert it objectively here. It's kind of a subjective measure, but I would probably rate it, let's say, a 6 out of 10. So while the love was there was a component that was missing. And then as far as giving back to the world, yes, we were manufacturing large gas frame turbines. Then the later position was parts that would support, all sorts of different things that we need. But there was a degree of indirectness, right? A series of steps before I could understand that I'm directly serving the community, right? I could justify it in a rational way. And I think with most of our businesses, we can do that. But what I was missing was the kind of human element of handing an ice cream to a kid and seeing that smile come back directly, or working directly around something that felt more around a need. And we can look further into that during the discussion later if you're curious about that. But in essence, what I want us to understand here is the correlation with what we know here and what has been an effective roadmap for me to understand how do I pursue meaningful work that ensures that I am fulfilled, that I don't feel useless, that I don't feel empty, that I don't feel uncertain, that I don't have money, right? Or that I do, right? The inverse. Because let's say what we've seen with the Ikigai model and why this model is important and why should you care about it. In essence, when I became interested in getting at the root of why do I feel I need to leave this great job that I have devoted basically my working, let's say the past, from the age of 18 to 25. I've dedicated all of my life to moving into this profession, right? This space here. My parents, leaders and mentors encouraged me to pursue something that I would be good at so that I could get paid for it. But what I didn't really hear was make sure that you love it and make sure that it really serves people. And for that reason, I was then searching for this mission, searching for this higher purpose and meaning. And so when I began to look into it, I came across the Okinawans. I worked for 2 Japanese companies, and there is a little small region in Japan with a group called the Okinawans that are the longest living people in the world, and they live 7 years longer on average than the next longest living centenarians. So from an evolutionary biology perspective, or just a humanitarian, well, I don't know if it's humanitarian, but let's just say a biology perspective, in the species of Homo sapien, you're looking at an abnormality. And not only from life of longevity, they're fulfilled and happy. Because there's a group of scientists and researchers that went in and studied this group. And what they discovered, along with healthy diet, they lived by these 4 core elements. That their day wasn't a separation of profession and then go do this other thing that I love. Their work was what they loved. Their work was their mission. And it was all collectively together. It wasn't a split identity. It was a central identity. And so looking at this, I would say this is our current state, to where we saw that there were missing elements, right? The feedback was very clear that there was no recognition, right, at the root. And so collectively, our workforce is missing these upper levels. We could say that these lower levels are met. Many would argue not even these lower levels are met. But for the sake of simplicity, I said that these lower levels are met. But the target I think that we need to work towards as business leaders is meeting these needs across the board. And I believe that there is a way to do that. So continuing with the root cause here, I'm going to simplify this and convert it into business structure from the psychological individual space into a more macro space. Is anyone familiar with Peak, Chip Conley's work? Okay, a lot of his work is pulled from Good to Great. Who here is familiar with Good to Great? Okay, so, right, it's based on that foundation. Now, Chip has done a great job with converting that more complex model into this model here. And the breakdown you see, we have money that equates or creates a base motivation, recognition that equates to loyalty, right? Let's think back to people are leaving. Why are they leaving? Lack of recognition. Are we seeing that come together a little bit there? Right? So businesses are offering money and it's yielding a base motivation, but collectively we're expecting loyalty without providing what the workforce is demanding. But at the pinnacle, if we want transformational businesses, legacy businesses, meaning is what will yield an inspired employee. And an inspired employee is what is really going to do amazing things for your business. So I think that's what we should all be striving for, is inspired employees. So remember what Ken spoke to, right? And then Delinda spoke to this other element. So that's the two reasons out of all of those different roots that I extracted what they were speaking about. So hopefully this simplistic framework now allows us to progress on to what I'll be getting into. So then scaling this up to a business perspective. So we're looking at the employee relationship truth here, right? And we understand that we'll yield base motivation when we provide that foundational aspect of Maslow's hierarchy. And then we'll yield loyalty as we progress up with recognition. And then when they find meaningful, purposeful work that they believe it's a part of a mission, think back Ikigai, the inspiration comes. And from there, it then feeds into our customers and or our community. Meeting expectations yields satisfaction. In today's market, satisfaction will not suffice. You better be at this level of meeting desires in order to compete. And ultimately, what you want to be able to do as a business is to meet the unrecognized needs of your customer, because that's where you're going to yield the evangelicals, the ones who are going to be word of mouth, right? What is that? The NPR score? NPS. Yes, there we go. Net Promoter Score, right? So this really, really feeds into that metric that a lot of businesses measure on. But what I'm showing you guys is relative to people, relative to relationships, this is the framework and how to make that happen. And then also we've got the legacy component. I'm not going to spend too much time in that, but basically there's the investment side to keep things moving, the profitability side of things. Again, this is a generalization and a collective average. Not everyone is here. We're all at different stages relative, and then even within that, with different people, we're at different stages. But collectively, I'm going to make it simple and say that this is where we're at, but with the rising tides of the challenges that come, with waves such as COVID, that kind of showcase the fragility of our systems, our value streams, we're going to have to elevate our game. We're going to have to rise with the rising tides. So our target is inspired employees, inspired customers, and investment that is legacy, that investors are proud to be a part of this thing that we're building. And we need leaders to make that happen. Servant leaders. So when I say servant leaders, what comes to your guys' mind? Who do you think about when I talk about servant leaders? I got something back here. Go ahead. Chick-fil-A. Well, I won't spend any more time there. Yeah, it's pretty apparent that Chick-fil-A is a great example of servant leadership. And so what I want to show us here is when it comes to people and Chick-fil-A's core values, they're meeting employees' base motivation. They're meeting employees' mid-tier motivation. And they're also meeting the pinnacle motivation, yielding inspiration. So I would say, when it comes to people, Chick-fil-A gets a big fat check. Now, when it comes to community, take a look at what the feedback says regarding Chick-fil-A's community impact. Communities love when Chick-fil-A's come into town. And it's a franchise, right? It's a big business. Why do we love that that big business is coming into town? Because it really serves its community. Not just a sponsorship of 1% of the revenues, right? Not a pretty picture that paints, they're really doing it. And it's not just through those PR stunts, but it's also through the service of their people who are genuinely serving the customer. There's a certain vibe, a certain spirit, I would say, that is at this place that is founded on servant leadership principles. And I believe that's the reason for revenues that look like this, that outpace McDonald's when they're working 6 out of the 7 days a week compared to 7 out of the 7 days a week, near doubling the revenues, and the profit margins are even beyond that. So if you care about money, the way to get there is to follow this structure of people, serving the customers, yielding the evangelicals that give you legacy company. So looking at servant leadership, we have 2 traditional models. So I've worked to some degree, been a part of a traditional leadership model. And what do I mean by that? Jack Welch, GE. Who's familiar with that model? Okay? Right? Now, I never worked directly for GE, but when I worked for Mitsubishi Power Systems, a lot of the talent that was brought in came from GE. So I directly reported those who directly reported to Jack. And through that model was definitely get shit done. Excellence, but there was a degree of what could be called cutthroat, right? Very, very, very competitive. Now, Mitsubishi, its model was servant leadership, a different philosophy, right? When philosophy, we're talking foundations here, okay? Which goes beyond science, which goes beyond policy. The philosophy, all businesses have it, and if you take it deeper, theology, right? That's really what we're getting at here, the root of things. And at the root, what I convey as the solution, based on what we saw with Chick-fil-A, is the servant leadership model. And what our workforce, those who we serve, are calling for is servant leadership. Take a look at the employees down beneath here. Notice their individual hierarchies of Maslow. What color are they? Do they look healthy? No. Does that look a little healthier? Okay. I believe the Ikigai framework can help lead us from this focus solely of profit, but understand following that more indirect approach of the investment of the people first, so that they then yield that profit But you have to be careful in that, right? With the primary goal of a servant leadership is not the profit indirectly. It truly is a byproduct of the heart of the leader serving those who they lead. What you value will always surface. How you can tell what you value is what you attune to. What do you focus on? What do you celebrate? How much time are you putting towards it? Map what you believe you value and compare it against what you actually value to get a gauge of, are you a servant leader or not? So what I'm calling forth here, and the current state that I believe that we're dealing with, is collectively at the macro, leadership has become prideful and greedy. Now I'm talking to myself here, okay? But at the collective of what we've seen with the workforce and what they're saying with not receiving recognition, not receiving support, not feeling XYZ, the list goes on. Notice the X's that came in here when I mapped the current state here. People are leaving the boat, right? We saw the exodus occur. People are leaving the hierarchy, which is relative, comparable, analogous, metaphorically, to this hierarchy, a boat hierarchy. I want you to think in those terms. And a servant leader, notice here, we have trust, sustainability. That's what's yielded when you bring love and true servant leadership to those who we're responsible for. And then when their needs are taken care of, they're inspired, so that that overpouring energy, that spirit, can go into the work they do, the work you give them to do. All right, so now continuing on with best practices here, the employee journey, attracting those who are on the same mission. So how do we take all of this, what seems to be very deep philosophical frameworks, and make it tangible into where I can walk out of here and get something done with my business today? Right now, there's going to be a sticker that's going to come around, something tangible you can put in your hands, that I've worked to basically take everything that we've just covered and to distill it down into one simple element that I, as the business founder, can understand, that those who I'm seeking to come join our team, to be a part of our hierarchy, our boat, our ark, can also understand. So in essence, this is a lead magnet that conveys our mission. Who are we? What are we here to do? Create to inspire. It outlines, first and foremost to me, I think it comes down to who we are as people. What do we love? Make note here, love. Make note here, love, right? So we've got the basic Ikigai framework that exists here. And then I've got a recipe for what is the fulfilled artisan. Now, fulfilled, out of the three levels, someone give me the answer of where fulfillment lies on the three-tier hierarchy. Is it low tier, mid-tier, or top tier fulfillment? 1, 2, or 3? 3, right? Fulfillment, meaning, all of those. So that's the space we're talking about. Inspiration, fulfillment, meaning is at that highest point. So there we see love's creating and engaging. That's the work we do at Rolling Monkey. First and foremost, with our business model, this is what matters to us. And with your business, you can define what matters most for your business and work to develop something that allows them to understand who and what you are so that you can effectively attract. The second piece here, good at. So what we're doing is we're taking this love for creating and engaging, and then we want to inspire others. Because our mission is to create, to inspire, right? We love creating. What do we do is we inspire, and then we serve our community and customers with that which we love to do. So we follow in that structure. We love to do it. We love to do our work. We're getting closer to that Ikigai model, bringing it back together. right? To where we're not split. I hate my work. I can't wait to get the hell out of here. I'm actually energized about this thing that I'm doing. And then I get a paycheck for it. And the company is happy to pay me for it because I'm doing a damn good job. Now, the way that we do this at Roll the Monkey is we're very clear in who we want to be a part of our team and our family and who we don't want to be a part of our team and our family. Because we're going to be hurting both ourselves and the employee if we say that we're somebody that we're not, following some trend that we think is going to get people in the door, just to have them come on board and find out who we really are, what do we really celebrate, what are we really attuned to, what do we really focus on. And they're going to say, this is not a right fit for me. I don't love this. I'm out. And how much money did you spend? Quite a bit. So get clear. The point I want to make here, guys, you have to understand who you are as a company. You have to do that deep work. With the SBDC, Valerie gave me a framework that says, Garrett, go do these things. What I did is ran through them quickly, didn't take the time to do them right. Came back a year or two later and said, whoa, I think I did this in a week and it should have taken me a year. I should have really taken my time with this. And there, I went back and really got clear on who we are so that I could come up with things such as this and articulate it. So whatever company you're a part of, it's founding members and the members that carry that founding legacy on, there's a DNA. There's something to that company. But if you can understand it and effectively distill it down into lead magnets to share with those out there that you're looking to attract to bring into your hierarchy, you're going to have intrinsically motivated individuals that will persevere through the shitstorms that may or may not come. Now, looking at onboarding, now that we've found the right people who align with us from a core value perspective and that are willing to go in the same direction that we are going in, how do we maintain them? Onboarding is a critical part of this journey. And typically when people come in, this is a pattern, by the way, that I've discovered within our company and that we're working to understand in different segments. The first segment that we're going to be looking at here is that onboarding. And typically what you see is very high challenge relative to their skills and abilities. And they're a bit overwhelmed, which yields anxiety. When they're overwhelmed, this is kind of the health of that individual. Not a direct correlation, but there is a correlation of flow, which I'll be getting into, and Maslow's hierarchy, their human well-being and state. Where we want them is in this optimal zone of flow here, which this will be a reference. I'll get into the depth a little bit more and it'll help you understand this. But in essence, this green track is the one that I want you to understand is the ideal track that maintains employees. Isabel, how long have you been with our company?
4 years.
How long have we been open?
4 years.
Okay, Isabel is on this track, okay? Then we'll be getting into some other sections, but roughly what this plays out to look like is we want to mitigate this piece here. This says out, by the way. So this is anxiety, in flow, control, boredom, out. That is leaving the boat. Remember at the bottom of the hierarchy with servant leadership, the two X's, they're out of the boat. Remember the graph with the person falling off? They're out of the boat. So that is what we're looking at there. And ideally, we're meeting people's needs. They're in a flow state all the way through their journey, adding tremendous value and not leaving and jumping ship to another ship. So training within the flow zone. The flow zone, when I was working at my previous position in the, let's say, Fortune 500 space, I was mapping value streams. I was looking at communication and actual material flow. and looking at how that relates to the whole collective macro system. How can you understand what is functioning and how does this whole system create value? And from there, I would then identify bottlenecks and issues and then disperse and facilitate teams to alleviate those bottlenecks to create more flow and value out of that value stream, that entity, that body, that organization. The thing I became very interested in was culture and people. We could spend millions of dollars optimizing the automation here, getting different material processes developed, and typically that's where the money went because what we found was you could easily quantify and understand the return on investment. What was tough for me as a lean engineer, a value stream engineer, to gain a couple $1 million for was for people, was for culture. Why? It's tough to quantify that return on investment. We're dealing with subjective, so you had to convert it to objective in order to get the faith of them seeing the projections of what that investment would yield. Flow is what I then became very focused on as a value stream engineer working to optimize cultures of large companies. What flow yields are numbers such as 500% more productive individuals. We're talking 200 to 500% faster when it comes to learning. So like it's in the zone of basically when you look at a human, right, and now I'm going to move into a kind of a scientific model, and there's an optimal state, a harmony, a frequency. That zone of flow is the zone of genius. That's where they're intrinsically motivated, and that's where they're more productive. These numbers are just ridiculous. I mean, we're not talking 100%, going from 30% individual in an anxiety state of, okay, I'm at 30%, I'm now going to 100%. We're talking much bigger numbers than that. The difference in productivity from someone in an apathetic or anxious state in comparison to someone who is in the zone. There's a tremendous difference in the way that they perform and the way they feel. It's a win-win for both the company and the employer. So here is the rough zone of flow relative to challenge and abilities. Here we can see when we're in that, what we saw, that green track, right? Not the one that's straight up, because right, straight up, that was anxiety, overwhelm is what we saw, right? And then towards the end, we saw them develop the skills, but then they became bored. And then what happens with boredom, right? If you're not in that flow zone, it's not where you want to be. The employer doesn't want it, the employee doesn't want it. Our responsibility as employers is to keep our employees in the zone of flow. What does that look like? Here's another way to look at it. Relative to their challenge, which could be correlated to their arousal, what are they engaged in, and their performance, right? The learning zone yields numbers like this. To bring another visual into it, right? We've got someone who is just asleep here, bored to death, someone who is in this zone of flow, and then typically here, maybe like you would think of a supervisor, overwhelmed, not knowing what to do, right? Oftentimes, the anxiety state is the supervisor, and oftentimes the value-add direct labor is going to be in this boredom state following a very cyclical standard work. It doesn't challenge them enough. What we want to do is challenge them to where they're in this engaged zone, but not over-challenge them. There's an optimal state for humans to be in a work environment. So how do you do this? How do you get your team into that flow channel? You guys already know how to do it, right? As leaders, we can control two variables. Their challenges, how much we place on their plate, and then how do we develop them? These are variables we can control. So we can influence where our team is relative to this flow channel. This method here, looking at A1, progressing up to A3, is the sink or swim method, right? So we see challenge, someone, dad throws you over the boat into the water, challenge. You're going to have to develop those skills pretty rapidly. swim. That same pattern is applicable in the workspace, is learning how to swim through the sink or swim method. Typically what we do, which takes more time and money, but isn't quite so harsh, is the classroom method. Progressing from A1 to A2, we develop those skills in the classroom like we're doing here. Not very challenging, take it at your own pace. Take notes, pay attention, don't pay attention. Whatever you want to do, right? You're developing those skills at whatever level. And then when the test comes, right, the next pandemic, the next wave, where are you going to be? Did you study enough to get to where you can actually handle the challenge that comes? Again, you can look at it all sorts of levels, individual and macro, collectively. But we all know this, so I want you to understand this is nothing new. I'm just trying to connect dots from the root of what is going on and then how we can effectively address this. We know that measuring is a big, important part of that. So what we measure improves. What we measure and report out on improves exponentially, right? Exponentially. And so at Roll the Monkey, one of the things that we do is we plot where different individuals are. This would be a judgment that would come from our store manager, as well as a judgment that would come from the artisan themselves. And together they agree, where do they see themselves on this chart? What it looks like is we have someone new who's just entered the space. They're a bit overwhelmed. We've got somebody who's been there for a minute, but they're getting the hang of it. We've got a collective group who's just kicking ass in flow, yielding the productivity and inspiration that you guys have probably experienced yourself coming into Roll the Monkey. And then one of the biggest challenges we face is control. Typically, we saw that pattern, right? And I'll show you here in a minute the pattern. But it falls off and then people leave over time. Because we have to continue to challenge people so that they don't, because basically the pattern looks like this. You come in the door, you learn a lot, you're challenged, you get the hang of it, you're in the zone of flow, then you understand pretty much how everything works, and then you get a little bit relaxed, and then before you know it, you're bored. And then before you know it, you know what? This sucks, I'm searching for more. And then you know what? I'm out of here. That's the pattern. There it is. And that thing that I just mapped for you guys, and that we're about to see again in a minute, I don't know if it exists on the internet, but it's what I've tested and found in the pursuit of testing the theories within my prototype, which is Roll the Monkey. And so we're tracking this over time, and what we're doing is we're seeing a lot more people get into what we call the zone of engagement, which for us, of course, flow is the target, but we're okay with being in arousal or control. This is the zone of engagement. We do not want people here. We do not want people here. So you can see collectively, like we've had a couple of challenges, but then we know exactly who to work with here and how to get them to where they're not apathetic, worried, overwhelmed, or bored, that we can help them find meaningful work in these environmental states. So looking at this journey, hopefully that framework that you just saw gives you a better understanding of this flow track. Again here, right? We saw the one individual who was very overwhelmed coming on board. Then they progress in time into flow. But the more that people remain in this control space, the more probability they'll become bored in time and then leave in time. So we want to continuously provide challenge. So now looking at the next phase of this, so now that we've used our lead magnet to get the right people in the door, and we've gotten them in a flow environment to where they're optimized, not overwhelmed, not underwhelmed, now we start spending some time to really meet their needs. And like I said, what gets measured improves. So I believe we saw this during our last Eggs in Excellence session, but Maslow's hierarchy of employees' engagement Maslow's relative to employees' engagement. So here's a framework that we use, nothing that we've developed, that we've pulled from other great companies, is this breakdown here. Again, we do the same thing with flow. We're working with the individual to understand, where do you see yourself on this? Are your needs met? Do you feel that you are a vital part of the business? Do you feel that you are important at work? Right? That's addressing what we saw with the lack of recognition. We're asking the question, are you recognized? For me, more importantly, do you feel that you inspire others to do their best with your coworkers? Are you developing and sustaining this business? Do you love working here? That's what these employees not only exemplify, but believe. My store manager is looking for the traits, and then they're saying, this is what I believe. And together, we say, then this is where we're going to place you. And if you're at the top, we'll work on a plan to keep you at the top. If you're down low and you're feeling, let's say, not engaged, is there a way that we can bring you up to feel more engaged? Or can we help you find a job that aligns with Ikigai? Because what we most likely have with something down here is we messed up on the Ikigai alignment, right? That lead magnet, right? That means that it means that we kind of missed that structure. There's other things involved there, but we can at least measure it to then do the investigation to understand what the real issue is. So this can be measured over time, and then what we find is, well, improvements over time. Moving people up, meeting their needs, right? Now, the retaining aspect. Once you're meeting needs, how do you maintain and retain this on out to where people are continuously engaged and inspired? A vision is needed. Something that inspires and something that they can see that is ahead of them, right? The way that the human mind, whether from a neuroscience perspective or a psychological perspective, is we have an idea of what we desire, and whenever we feel fulfillment is when we understand that we've made a step closer to that desire we have. And then they call it the cocktail, oxytocin, dopamine, all of the feel-goods come out. And that's what yields the learning numbers that you saw, all of that stuff. I won't go into the neuroscience of it, but it gets really cool if you want to layer over the neuroscience on top of the psychology, and you can really see how this thing works. But a vision is a very big part of that. One thing we've done at Roll the Monkey is really invest into gamification around core values. So who here is familiar with gamification? Who's heard of it? Okay. So gamification is, well, I'll take my son, for example. One thing that he's very eager to step off into, one thing that brings him into a flow state is a video game, right? He moves to that. He's intrinsically motivated by that. He wants to stay there. He could not eat because he's so engaged in that video game. That video game was designed by designers. We can do the same thing here as employers, but not in the virtual world, but the real world. Let that sink in. So what we're doing is to work on gamifying, bringing the game that intrinsically motivates and keeps people engaged into the real world so we can actually embody it in the flesh and show up and really do things. For us, our core values here, positive spirit, we kind of converted them to names. These are badges that at the leadership level, our store manager, I guess team leaders technically do participate in this. Really, we can all participate in it, but primarily the great function and the sustainability of this particular mechanism that meets the need of esteem out of Maslow's hierarchy, a need which is required to keep people in your workforce, is recognition. These individuals are recognizing each other around the core values which promote the direction of where we're going. For us, we want to have a positive spirit to serve our customers. We want to be team players that pick up the slack when things fall apart. That we want to have efficiency, speed, but not only speed. We want to be game changers, innovators. We want to have quality around that ice cream that we deliver, Instagram cup ready. We want to be problem solvers, overcoming the challenges that are inevitable. We want to have great customer engagement, actually measure that. Is it real? Is it genuine? Is it authentic? So we gamify around that, and people level up. Right now we have somebody that I think is north of 100 badges around that. And we're now working on a tier system to where at 10, maybe you get a shirt with that indication of recognition. Mike, pulling from the military here, leveraging a framework that has been proven for millennia, right? I believe so. I can think of some French that are very well dressed with the badges. So there is this pride element with wearing the badges on the hat, but we're now progressing to where at that 100 level, you're the only person with that shirt that basically says, I'm a badass, relative to that particular core value. And people flex. They come out and say, hey, I'm good at this. And then once they become strong and say this discipline, this domain, this core value, once they've mastered this, they now can take on additional challenge and go master this. So can you see how that model functions? This is just one piece that meets beyond esteem, really. It can, in essence, bring people and meet all of these needs to where people feel of use, not dealing with the negative ramifications of missing a mark here. Because, again, if you miss one mark here, you could feel useless. If you miss another mark, you could feel uncertain. If you miss another mark, you could feel empty. And these are the symptoms our workforce is dealing with. They're feeling useless. They're feeling empty. They're feeling uncertain. So we have to be able to meet those needs so that they feel that. Not only just wealth. We have to meet the need of certainty, the need of fulfillment, the need of recognition. Mechanisms like this that you can implement in your company can yield ikigai, can yield reason for being, can yield healthier, happier, more productive employees. So I've already covered that. I won't spend too much time into that, but basically we can see how this one simple element around badges and a couple of rules in the workplace, allowing employees to support and recognize each other around their job description, can meet their needs. Now, mapping core values to a vision. For Roll and Monkey, our first core value is purpose, specifically doing what we love and doing it good, right? That's taking our passion and then serving others with that passion. So what we have here is our ikigai. The ice cream piece that is in your hand, the ikigai ice cream combination, is basically here. That's the vision of where we're going. Integrity is, are we really going there? We can measure the integrity. Are we on track or are we off track, right? Integrity is that other value. Continuous improvement, notice the cycle here. One of the things that we went through with the Small Business Development Committee is one macro cycle of continuous improvement. If you're a Christian, that converts to death and rebirth. In general terms, it's called continuous improvement or growth. It's relatively the same pattern. So what we're going through is a cycle of death and rebirth, right? Failing forward, or PDCA, the scientific method, or growth around a certain track, a certain path towards a defined vision. And then what that allows us to do is then bind our family, our body, our boat, our ark together, be creative in the work. So think of the oar, and we're collectively in a boat. And from there, the oar rowing together is the metric that we can measure. How far are we moving towards our vision, right? The vision is there defined. The vision can be, for Roll and Monkey, 500 locations in 8 years. Or I've got an idea that might be a little better, 777 locations in 7 years. Because I just like the number 7, and there is some great wisdom behind the number 7. That can be a vision, and we can measure, are we getting towards that vision in the 7 years? So creativity is another part of that. But notice this is not just core values defined, and we say, hey, it's up there on the wall. I'm working to integrate it into a gamified worldview that allows for the actual embodiment of what our business is doing. And the last piece here is innovation. Hopefully what I'm sharing with you is innovative. I haven't found it. A lot of it is pulled from others, but I believe that our team is really working on some innovative solutions. whether it's in the ice cream shop or whether it is within social science, is what I'm really discovering, is what I'm really passionate about. And then I won't bring out all of the stuff, but I had to bring out one piece. You can map this relative to flow and actually measure it. So do we see the same pattern here progressing towards an aim, a vision, and then the environment, which in essence can be the sea, which we're in, right? So we saw that initial image. That's the waters, guys. There's too much chaos, too much order, right? A whirlpool, yin and yang, right? Do we see that pattern, yin and yang? On yin and yang, that line that is talked about there is flow. So if you can imagine that model, that symbol of yin and yang, which represents too much overwhelm, too much underwhelm, and that sweet channel right in between here is that optimal zone that humans were designed for. Whether by God, whether by evolutionary biology, I would say both. There is an optimal state that yields a certain harmony that can be measured. And it's our responsibility as leaders to ensure our people are in that harmony, in that zone of learning, in that zone of productivity, in that zone of intrinsic motivation. And so to simplify all of this complexity and how I would share this to our artisans at a team meeting is storytelling through art. And so I believe that we're like a crew on a mission that leverages core values to direct us towards a vision. So Roll the Monkey is in our boat here. We have an aim of where we're going, which is in your hand. And then we reverse engineer that vision to task and measure, are we getting there, day in, day out, that keeps us in that optimal state. And I believe that if we follow great companies like Chick-fil-A that are heading towards the right values, servant leadership, that there is sustainability that is proven by other great companies that can be examples for our businesses. Thank you guys for your time and attention.